Everybody knows the rhyme. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. It's one of the first things we learn about history. This neat and tidy story of a brave Italian sailor who stumbled upon a new world. We're told this single event kicked open the door for Europe to explore and colonize the Americas, changing the world forever. It's a great story. But what if it's missing a few key chapters? What if I told you Columbus was almost 500 years late to the party? And what if the real story of America's discovery by outsiders has less to do with Spanish caravels and more to do with Viking longships? Or even colossal treasure fleets from the other side of the planet? The official story is simple, but the truth is buried in ancient sagas, carved in runes, and hidden in the records of the most advanced empire on Earth. Today, we're pulling the files on the forgotten explorers who really found America first. First, let's get the official report out of the way. Case File 1492, the Columbus Voyage. To understand why Columbus gets all the credit, you have to get inside his 15th century world. Europe was obsessed with the East. Spices, silk, porcelain, these were the hot commodities, and they were ridiculously expensive. The land routes, like the Silk Road, were long, dangerous, and controlled by empires that slapped on taxes every step of the way. Finding a direct sea route was the ultimate jackpot. The Portuguese were the rock stars of navigation at the time, spending decades mapping a path down the coast of Africa. But Christopher Columbus, a largely self-taught mariner from Genoa, had a crazier idea. He was convinced the world was smaller than everyone thought, and that he could reach the East Indies by sailing straight west. For years, he was turned down flat. Experts in Portugal and England told him his math was wrong, that the ocean was just too big. But Columbus was nothing if not persistent. He finally found sponsors in King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain, who, after unifying their country, were itching to get a leg up on their Portuguese rivals. On August 3, 1492, Columbus set sail with his tiny fleet. The Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. 10 grueling weeks later, on October 12th, a lookout spotted land. Columbus had hit an island in the Bahamas. He was sure he'd found an outpost of Asia, and he called the native people Indians, a mistake that stuck. He would make 4 voyages in total, exploring the Caribbean and the coasts of Central and South America, but he died in 1506, still insisting he had reached Asia. So why do we remember him? Not because he was first. We remember Columbus because his voyages sparked a permanent and often brutal link between the two hemispheres. His journeys triggered the era of European colonization and the massive Columbian exchange of goods, ideas, and diseases. His discovery stuck. It changed everything, but it absolutely was not the first. For that, we need to open a much colder case. For centuries, what I'm about to tell you was dismissed as folklore epic poems about mythic heroes. They were called the Vinland Sagas. These medieval Icelandic texts tell the story of the Vikings. Not just the cartoon characters with horned helmets, but some of the most skilled and fearless sailors the world has ever seen. The story starts around 985 AD with Eric the Red. After being exiled from Iceland for manslaughter, he sailed west and set up the first Norse colony in Greenland. A few years later, a trader named Bjarne Herjolfsson was sailing to Greenland when a storm blew him way off course. He saw a new land to the west, covered in trees, but he was a practical guy, not an adventurer. He just turned around, found Greenland, and told everyone what he'd seen. That story lit a fire under Eric the Red's son, a young man with a serious case of wanderlust, Leif Erikson. Around the year 1000, Leif bought Bjarne's ship, gathered a crew, and sailed west on purpose to find this new land. The sagas describe what he found in stunning detail. First, a land of flat stones and glaciers he called Helgeland, land of flat stones, which we now believe is Baffin Island. Sailing south, he found a forested coast he named Markland, land of forests, likely modern-day Labrador. Finally, he came to a place that sounded like paradise. The climate was mild, salmon packed the rivers, and famously, wild grapes were growing everywhere. Leif named it Vinland, the land of wine. He and his crew built a small settlement and spent the winter, becoming the first known Europeans to do so in North America. For 900 years, that was just a cool story. There was no physical proof. But in the 1960s, a Norwegian husband and wife team, Helge and Anne Stein Ingstad followed the saga's descriptions to the northern tip of Newfoundland. In a place called Lance aux Meadows, they hit the archaeological jackpot. Buried in the dirt were the remains of a Norse settlement turf-walled buildings, a forge with iron slag, a bronze pin, and a spindle whorl for making yarn. This was technology unknown to the native peoples of the area. It was the smoking gun. The sagas were real, and now we know with incredible precision when they were there. For years, carbon dating gave a fuzzy time frame around 1000 AD, but a groundbreaking 2021 study gave us an exact date. Scientists used a massive solar storm from the year 993 AD that left a unique radiocarbon signature in tree rings worldwide. By analyzing wood cut by metal axes at the site, they counted the rings from that signature and determined the exact year the trees were chopped down. 1021 AD Vikings were active in North America exactly 1 millennium before the study was published. So if they made it here, why didn't they stay? The sagas tell us they weren't alone. They met the indigenous people, whom they called Scrowlings. After some initial trading, cultural misunderstandings led to violence. A small band of Norsemen, thousands of miles from home and facing a hostile population, couldn't make it work. After a few years, they packed up and went back to Greenland, and their discovery faded into legend. The Viking case file is closed. It's not a theory. It's a historical fact. Leif Erikson beat Columbus by nearly 500 years. But what if there's another, even more mind-blowing claim? One that involves not just a few longships, but a fleet of sea monsters from the mightiest empire on the planet. Okay, now we open our most controversial case file. This is the story of a lost golden age of Chinese exploration and a wild theory that a massive fleet of treasure ships reached the Americas in 1421, a full 71 years before Columbus. First, you have to understand Ming Dynasty China in the early 15th century. While Europe was a collection of bickering backwater kingdoms, the Ming Dynasty was the world's undisputed superpower. Beijing was the largest city on Earth, and Chinese technology was centuries ahead of the West. At the center of this power was Admiral Zheng He. He commanded a fleet that would make other navies look like bath toys. Between 1405 and 1433, he led 7 epic voyages across the Indian Ocean, not to conquer, but for diplomacy and to project Chinese power. The sheer scale is hard to wrap your head around. Columbus's flagship, the Santa Maria, was about 85 feet long. Zheng He's largest treasure ships were rumored to be over 400 feet long floating cities with hundreds of crew members. The official records show these fleets sailed to Southeast Asia, India, and the east coast of Africa. That part is undisputed history. But this is where the official story ends and the great mystery begins. The theory was most famously pushed by a retired British submarine commander named Gavin Menzies in his book 1421, The Year China Discovered the World. Menzies argued that on the 6th voyage, part of the fleet split off, with some ships circumnavigating the globe and charting the Americas. It's an incredible claim, but what's the evidence? Well, this is where it gets messy. First, maps. Menzies points to old European maps that seem to show parts of the Americas before Columbus. He claims this knowledge could only have come from leaked Chinese charts. Historians, however, argue these are just cartographic fantasies or misdrawn parts of Asia. There's no concrete link to China. Second, archaeology. People have claimed to find Chinese junk wrecks and stone anchors off the American coasts. But none of these have ever been verified. Not a single undisputed pre-Columbian Chinese artifact has been found in the Americas. The theory lacks the one thing the Viking case has: hard, physical proof. So if it happened, why did the story disappear? Menzies' theory says that after the voyage, the emperor died and a new, conservative government saw the expeditions as a waste of money. They allegedly destroyed the ships and the records in a massive cover-up. Mainstream historians say that while records were likely destroyed due to political infighting, the idea that news of a whole new continent could be completely suppressed just doesn't hold water. The 1421 theory is an amazing what-if, but without a smoking gun, it remains a spectacular piece of historical speculation, not history. Mainstream historians widely reject it as pseudo-history. The Vikings are proven, the Chinese are a compelling mystery, but there are other folders in this filing cabinet. Persistent theories suggest that Portuguese navigators, the best in the business, may have accidentally reached the Americas before Columbus and kept it a state secret to avoid conflict with Spain. King John II of Portugal even reportedly told Columbus about land to the west. But just like the Chinese theory, there's no direct proof. And the list goes on. There are theories about ancient Japanese fishermen drifting to Ecuador, Polynesians reaching South America, and even claims of ancient Romans making the trip. They're all fascinating puzzles, but they all lack the undeniable evidence found at Meadows. So where does that leave us? We started with the simple story of Columbus, the celebrated discoverer of America. But that's just not the whole picture. The case for the Norse is closed. We know, thanks to their sagas and the undeniable proof in the ground, that Leif Erikson and his crew were building houses in North America in 1021 AD. They were the first Europeans to make it. Then there's the file on the Chinese treasure fleet, a historical mystery that's more of a what if than a what happened. It's a powerful reminder that history is sometimes what gets lost to time. Ultimately, the question, who discovered America, is complicated. The very first discoverers were, of course, the ancestors of Native Americans who populated the continents over 12,000 years ago. In the story of transoceanic contact, Columbus wasn't first. His voyage was one of consequence, not of precedence. It was the one that stuck with world-altering results. The real story of discovery is a sprawling, messy, and infinitely more interesting epic. It's a tale of Viking longships, whispered legends of giant fleets, and the human drive to see what's over the horizon. And it makes you wonder, what other lost voyages are still out there just waiting to be found? What do you think? Is the evidence for the Chinese fleet compelling, or just a great story? Are there other forgotten explorers we missed? Let us know your theories in the comments. And if you enjoy solving historical mysteries, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next investigation. Thanks for watching.